Behavioral interview questions stump more candidates than any other type of question. And in your Ernst Young interview, they are absolutely going to ask you behavioral interview questions. And it's going to be a tough interview, but it's about to be a lot less tough for you because in today's video, I'm actually going to give you some of the actual questions that they're going to ask you in your interview. I'm also going to teach you how to answer all behavioral interview questions and how to identify you are being asked one. Now, this is video 2 of a 4-part series, so if this is the first video you are seeing, make sure you go to the playlist and watch the first video. And stick around to the very end, because at the very end, I will put the next video in the series on the screen right here, and you can seamlessly go from video 2 to video 3. All right, with that being said, let's get started. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is what is a behavioral interview question? Now, a behavioral interview question is just a question where they're asking you about something that occurred in the past, and then they're asking you to walk them through how you handled that situation. Now, you can tell you're being asked a behavioral interview question because usually it sounds like this. Tell me about a time when. Give me an example of a time when. Time when are the two words you're looking for. The vast majority of behavioral interview questions will have time when in there because it's basically prompting you to think about a time when in the past when something happens. Now, whenever you're asked a behavioral interview question, you want to use the STAR method. Now, the STAR method is a framework to answer behavioral interview questions to make sure you're including all the necessary details. It's an acronym that stands for situation, task, action, and result. And if you walk through your answer and you include all those things, you're going to be able to answer the questions you're being asked effectively. Sometimes when it makes sense, throw an L on the end for lesson, if you learn something that can be applied to future situations. All right, with that being said, let's jump into the first question. Now, the first question is, tell me about a time you worked under pressure. Now, this is a very common question that you might get asked in any interview, especially one where there might be tight deadlines or there's high pressure situations. What you really want to do here is a few things. One, use the STAR method to make sure you're answering in an effective way and including all relevant details. But additionally, it's really important that you show that you're someone who is comfortable under pressure. If when you're going through and you're sharing this story, you seem really stressed in just talking about it, they're gonna get the impression you're not comfortable under pressure. And the next thing that's really important to do, the third thing here, is it has to be like a high pressure situation. If you describe a situation to them and they view that situation as not stressful and not high pressure, then that doesn't get it done. They're going to be like, oh, well, this person probably isn't in a lot of high pressure situations, so how in the world are they going to be able to handle them in this job? In fact, they think a situation that isn't high pressure actually is not a good match. Now, I can't tell you exactly what to say because this question is personal to your background. The example you have to give is something that happened in your past. But the additional keys, talk about a situation that you had in the past. Talk about how you reacted calmly, cool under pressure. You determined the best way to go forward, and you were able to execute something well, even though it was high pressure. And if you do that, you'll do great. The next question is, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult customer or stakeholder. This is one of the most common questions you will be asked in a customer-facing role. Companies ask this question all the time. It's really important to have a good answer here. So to answer it well, first, STAR method, situation, task, action, result. The second thing you have to do is when you're walking them through, why the customer was difficult, you can't be negative towards that customer. You have to share how they were difficult, so what it was about the situation that was making them challenging to deal with, but you can't be negative towards them, like, oh, this client was a real jerk, right? That's not the right way to describe the customer. What you can say is this customer was very stressed out. They were coming to me under a moment of duress, and they really needed solutions quickly. And I could tell they were quite agitated. So what I did was, and then you talk about how you went about resolving it. So make sure you talk about the customer in a kind way and you describe them in a way that isn't insulting. Use the STAR method, and then you have to talk about how you solve the issue for them, how you did it in cool, calm, collected way. You didn't take anything personally, but you went above and beyond to rectify the situation with them. So then when it was done, like when it was all said and done, they were happy with the service they got. That's what you have to do. And if you can do those things, you're gonna do great. This next question is, explain a risk you took in a previous project and how you handled it. Now, you might have noticed time when was absent from this, But it is one of those rare instances where they are talking about something that happened in the past and what your behavior was in handling the situation. Now, when you're talking about a risk, you have to make sure that, one, it's an actual risk. It can't just be, I did something that was part of my job. No, this has to be something that carried a little bit more weight, a little bit more gravity than your typical decision. You need to be able to talk them through your logic on why you thought they made sense, right? This is a risk, but why was it a risk worth taking? Whenever you're asked a question like this, part of it is they just want to be able to evaluate the way you think about issues and your ability to weigh pros and cons of a stressful, difficult, and ultimately risky situation. So, STAR method, got to demonstrate an actual risk, right? Then you have to walk them through your thought process and why this risk was acceptable and the best decision. And then ideally, it's a risk that turned out well, right? Like you made a bet, you won. That's ultimately the best type of story here because it shows that it was a risky situation, but you thought about it in the right way, you made the right call, and there was a payoff associated with your decision. That would be the best ideal outcome here. Now, the next question you're going to need to learn how to answer when you are interviewing with Ernst Young is, why do you want to work at Ernst Young? It is one of the most important questions you're going to get asked in any interview, because if you don't have a good answer here, they will hire somebody else who is equally as qualified but more passionate about the opportunity. And it's why I made this video here. This video here is the third video in the series. It is a must watch. I will see you over there.